Here to dive into industry trends with leading ETF experts, this is ETF Spotlight with Nina Mishra.
Hello and welcome to ETF Spotlight. I'm your host, Nina Mishra. In this episode, we focus on cybersecurity and related ETFs. In the first part, I'll be joined by UGA Professor Dr. Dave Chatterjee to discuss some of the recent trends and also how we can protect ourselves from cyber criminals in this work-from-home era. In the second part, I will highlight 4 cybersecurity ETFs that are among the big beneficiaries of this work-from-home economy. I hope you enjoyed this discussion and also find it very useful. Joining me now is Dr. Dave Chatterjee, MIS professor at the University of Georgia. He's a renowned cybersecurity expert. Dr. Chatterjee, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you so much, Nina, for that warm introduction. I'm humbled. I probably know a little bit, and hopefully I can inform your listeners.
So we know that our world is becoming increasingly digitized and interconnected. And this pandemic has actually accelerated that trend. And in fact, we have probably seen years worth of digital transformation in months. But this digital transformation has also increased the risk of security breaches and threats. So to start off, could you tell us how this pandemic has accelerated the need for cybersecurity solutions?
Absolutely. So as you correctly said, this pandemic is fueling the other epidemic, and that's the cyber attack epidemic that's been going on for a while. But with this pandemic, people have been forced to change their ways of working. They're working from home. They're communicating using informal and relatively insecure communication platforms and networks. What that means is we are talking about using personal devices that are not running the most robust security software. We are talking about storing official data, critical data, in low security storage locations. And coupled with that, organizations have been rushed to make adjustments, to support remote work, to support remote collaboration. And as a result, they have had to sacrifice their cybersecurity posture, which implies weaker controls. So the end result, from a security standpoint, many organizations are not in the best situation, and they're looking for better tools, better solutions to support their new work environment. Another aspect that comes to mind here is the compliance aspect. Stay-at-home workforce pose compliance risks, especially when PII and sensitive data are not properly protected or are in locations or in regions that have not been approved. And as I alluded to a little earlier, rapid and accelerated adoption of new cloud technologies to maintain operations often results in solutions that are not the best from a security standpoint. So that's kind of what we are running into in this new environment, and definitely companies are looking for better tools, better solutions.
So in your view, what are the top 5 cyber threats currently in this era of connected devices and rising use of personal computers, personal internet connections, and increasing digitization?
The top 5 in my list would be phishing, ransomware, IoT attacks. IoT is Internet of Things attacks, insider threats, and adversarial artificial intelligence attacks. So I have an interesting story on phishing. Yesterday, I saw an email that seems to have come from the associate dean, and the title was urgent, and it was a one-liner saying, "Dave, can we talk quickly? What is your cell number?" And generally, when I get an email from him, I know it's something really important. So I didn't even bother to check the email address. I just gave him my cell number. And then I get a text saying, hey, when can we talk? And I said, I can talk right now. The response was, well, I'm in a meeting right now. Do you mind running an errand for me and getting something from the store? And then I picked up and I said, oh my God, here I claim to be some kind of an expert and I have just been spammed.
Wow,
So I immediately blocked the cell number, and I went and checked the email address. Surely it was a fictitious email address, and I informed the folks concerned in my organization. So I share this story to highlight a couple of things. Each one of us can be a victim of a phishing attack. What is a phishing attack? When you receive an email which seems genuine, but it is not, seems to be coming from an appropriate source, but it is not, and it's asking you to do stuff like, in this case, wanted to have a quick chat with me, wanted my cell number. In other situations, it might ask you to follow a link and then maybe go and change your password or your login credentials. You could be receiving such emails from your bank or from any other financial services company. When you get such emails where they are asking you to do something, it's always better to call and validate. Never share your cell number, which I did, so I'm not practicing what I preach, but we all make mistakes. And the reason I made that mistake was I was multiprocessing, I was in a rush, I assumed everything was fine, and unfortunately, we have to be way more paranoid, way more sensitive, or we have to be much more careful in our approach in this highly digitized environment. Another interesting story, these days, the scam artists have started using artificial intelligence technology to emulate voices. The CEO of this UK-based energy firm was speaking on the phone with his boss, who happens to be the chief executive of the firm's German parent company. And this chief executive from Germany asked the CEO to send funds to the tune of $243,000 to a Hungarian supplier. The request was urgent, and this senior executive fell for that phishing scam. So that's the new reality, where you might be receiving emails that seem very genuine. You might receive calls that seem very genuine. So we have to be always on our guard and take our steps very carefully, not hand out any information, not act on a request unless we have verified the source. Moving on, ransomware, which has been around for a very long time, and ransomware attacks are actually growing as we speak. It's a very popular and devastating form of attack where the malware freezes victim machines and networks, and the criminals demand a ransom, typically in cryptocurrencies such as bitcoins, so that the victims can again gain access to their data. In other words, you pay if you want access to the data. Now here's the challenge. There is no guarantee that if you paid, you will have access to the data. And it has happened in the past when payment has been made, either the victim didn't get access to the data, or the data they got access to wasn't quite all that they had before. So it's a terrible problem to experience. The ransom amount can be in the six figures. The ransom amount could be in the thousands. Everyone can be a victim of ransomware. Large organizations, small and medium-sized businesses, as well as individuals. You might recollect the WannaCry ransomware attack. which infected over 200,000 computers. The impact was global, and every possible industry sector was impacted, especially healthcare. In March of 2018, the city of Atlanta suffered one of these attacks, and the expense exceeded $17 million. Moving on to the third one, which is the IoT attacks or Internet of Things attacks. As you know, in today's day and age, every object, every appliance is becoming smart. They can communicate with each other via the internet.
Yes.
So we are in the age of smart devices. We are seeing the use of these appliances at homes. We are wearing them as smart watches. Healthcare organizations use it extensively. The challenge is the manufacturers of these devices do not always have the best security in place. And it's a nightmare for the chief information security officer of, say, a large healthcare company to ensure that all these smart devices that are being used and that connect with their machines, with their computers, to share data, confidential data. It's a nightmare for the CISO to ensure that those devices are secure. And it's very common for hackers to gain access to one of those IoT devices. And once they gain access to one of them, they can penetrate and get into the main network, get to the main servers, and you have a data breach. While we, in this day and age where we are striving for extreme connectivity, extreme digitization, there is a price to be paid for that convenience. And that price is the data breach, the loss of privacy, and many more. Then we have insider threats. Insider threats are essentially attacks which are either intentionally or unintentionally triggered by employees. It is intentional when we have disgruntled employees. A 2019 data breach investigation report finds that a third of all data breaches are caused by malicious insiders. Even cybersecurity firms are not immune from such threats. A particular firm's employee illegally accessed and sold customer data to a third party. So that's number 4. And then we come to the 5th, which is adversarial AI attacks, where these hackers have learned to use artificial intelligence to do the work for them. And these AI-enabled devices go looking for vulnerabilities, exploit those vulnerabilities, trigger different types of attacks, and things happen. On the other side, when we'll talk about these later, solutions are being developed, and they are also AI-driven, so they can thwart these attacks. In other words, proactively prevent such attacks. So this battle of cyber attacks and cyber threats and cybersecurity, which was being waged primarily between people, the good and the bad, has now moved on to a plane where we are using devices.
This sounds very scary. And I recently read, I think it was in Forbes magazine, that ransomware attacks in particular are on the rise. And the industry is about $1.4 billion currently because Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies have just made it easier for these criminals to steal money and information from people using ransomware. So obviously, we are using personal devices and internet connection, which you mentioned are not as secure as company networks. And this era of working from home is likely to continue for some time because we may return to normal when we have a very effective vaccine to fight this virus. But even then, many companies have already said that they will make remote working kind of the norm for for employees who want to work from home. So obviously cyber threats are on the rise, and I recently read an article in the Wall Street Journal that many people are posting their work from home photos of online meetings, remote working setups on their social media. That has also increased the threat of the information being stolen. So, what would be your suggestion for protecting ourselves from cyber criminals in this work from home era?
So, as I said earlier, we all need to practice good cybersecurity hygiene. What does good cybersecurity hygiene mean for individuals? Number one, first identify what is sensitive and critical data for you. Once you've identified that, next identify where is that data stored, on which devices or on which locations. Number two, back up that data. Back up using online and offline storage. Even keep paper printouts. So it has to be a multi-pronged approach of backups. You can never be 100% secure, no matter what you do. So the best thing you can do is closely monitor what's most important to you from the standpoint of confidentiality, privacy, and protect those assets. This way, this approach, this focused approach, makes it a little easier as opposed to trying to protect everything. Number three, secure access. That includes using multi-factor authentication, using a VPN, a virtual private network, using strong passwords. I'm a fan of not writing down passwords. I'm a fan of password phrases. You rather lose your password than retrieve them electronically from some source, because you always can reset the password. So either you come up with a very complex passphrase that nobody will ever know excepting you, and you can use it for all your access requirements, or just use different passwords. It is inconvenient, but as I said earlier, you pay a price for convenience. Next,
Correct.
be vigilant, be disciplined. What does that mean from the standpoint of securing yourself and securing your data? Number one, closely monitor your credit card and bank accounts. It helps if you're not having to monitor 5 or 10 accounts. If you can consolidate them to 1 or 2 and keep a close tab on the transactions, enable the notifications, then don't open any email from unknown sources, which I did. And at times you learn best from experience. So I live to share this story. Do not open emails from unknown sources. In my case, it was a highly known source, senior leadership. But then instead of just responding, I should have had the discipline of calling to check, or even checking the email address. If I had checked the email address, I would have picked up easily. But we receive so many emails, it is hard to consistently practice that discipline. Don't click on links or attachments. Human beings by nature are innately curious. Many of us fall for these emails where somebody says that, hey, you're going to inherit $1 million, click on this link and do these things. I wish people didn't. When something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And then for official work, you have to take great precaution. Talk to the IT people in your organization. Ask them, what is the authorized, approved VPN? Where should you be storing the data? In other words, take real interest, take real ownership, and half the battle is won right there. Instead of waiting for the information to come to you, seek it. Software updates. Make sure you have enabled the feature whereby the relevant software on your systems are automatically updated. It's a very important feature. Ensure you're running the latest version of all applications and operating system software, especially security software. And also check your security and privacy settings. Enable most of them. And this is the way to check when you have really enabled all that you should. You'll have a hard time navigating from one website to another. So then you have to go back and maybe go down one notch. So you have to make some adjustments. So you have to find that balance where you can still surf, navigate, get your work done without being too lax from a security standpoint.
Those are very helpful tips. Thank you. So let's talk about the market. So as these threats are rising, obviously the need for cybersecurity solutions is also rising. So could you tell us about the kind of growth you expect in the global market for cybersecurity products and services?
Well, recently when I checked, the US market was valued at $165 billion in 2019. And there was an expectation that the US market will be $365 billion by 2025. So just imagine what the global market could be. And these trends are being driven by, as we discussed, increasing use of smart and IoT devices, the push towards greater remote computing and collaboration. More and more companies are recognizing that cybersecurity preparedness, cybersecurity readiness is a critical competency. It's a core capability. Our attack surfaces are expanding. The attackers are getting more sophisticated. So we need very sophisticated, very robust prevention, monitoring, and detection solutions. So no wonder there are numerous cybersecurity companies that are coming up and trying to get a market share.
So as you mentioned, cyber criminals are becoming more sophisticated. So obviously the need for better solutions is also rising. And you mentioned that some companies are doing very innovative work in this area. So could you talk a little bit about the kind of innovative work, disruptive work being done in this industry, and which companies are best positioned to benefit from this trend?
I'm happy to talk, but before I give you my 2 cents, I want to provide a disclaimer here that here the intent is to share with the listeners what I think are the good trends and what I see are good examples of companies doing good things. I am not trying to recommend company A over company B. That's something that your listeners will have to make their own calls. So to answer your question, there are a couple of things that your listeners or investors should be looking for. And I'll call them trends again. Are the solutions that are being developed, are they AI enabled? For instance, CrowdStrike is a company that's using machine learning to detect malware on laptops, mobile phones, and other devices. Another trend is using big data analytics to strengthen cyber defenses across on-premise and multi-cloud environments. We are talking about using such solutions to help understand your organization's risk exposure, to help battle different types of breaches, to help achieve compliance requirements. And all these capabilities are driven by big data analytics. A company that comes to mind that seems to be doing good work in this area is Splunk, S-P-L-U-N-K. The third area where we need a lot of help is identity management services. You will recollect I talked about insider threats. If you want to reduce
Yes.
insider threats, you have to do identity access management extremely well. Unfortunately, I have some experience that tells me that companies have a long way to go to do this well. Many large companies are maintaining Excel spreadsheets to keep track of access privileges, and the updates are obviously not as timely as they should be. So there is a new development where companies are using artificial intelligence capabilities to support identity management services. So once you have this platform, now you have the technology that will automate the process of deciding on the privileges, generating the report, sharing the report for approval from the relevant administrators. I want to qualify this description by saying that though it's AI driven, there is a human involvement to make sure everything is going as per protocol. A company that's doing this, identity management services using AI, is Okta, OKTA. Another area is providing sophisticated security vulnerability management services. Every company could do with a tool or a set of tools that constantly monitor their various devices, their various endpoints to detect threat-prone, highly vulnerable areas. You definitely want a tool to support you in that endeavor. And there are companies such as Qualys, Qualys, to do that. Besides that, another interesting area that's coming up is the use of the blockchain technology, the blockchain framework, to drive towards the goal of zero trust security. We are nowhere close to realizing that goal, but companies such as Cisco and others are making good progress in that direction. So that's kind of in a nutshell how I see the trends and how companies are playing in those market spaces. And again, I've just given you some examples. I'm not trying to suggest these are the companies to invest in. That judgment your investors will have to make.
Very interesting. And in fact, cybersecurity ETFs that I will be talking about in a little bit, they invest in most of these companies that you mentioned. So I'm sure these are doing very innovative, very interesting work in the area. Thank you so much, Dr. Chatterjee, for sharing your insights and also your personal phishing experience with us today.
Thank you very much, Nina. It was truly a pleasure. I hope you find my insights valuable, you and your listeners.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Dr. Chatterjee. Now let's talk about the ETFs. There are 4 ETFs currently available to investors, which provide access to cybersecurity stocks. The first one in the space is the ETF MG Prime Cybersecurity ETF, ticker symbol HAK, HACK. And it launched in November 2014, right after a very high-profile cyber attack on Sony Pictures. And that is why it was able to gather over $1 billion in assets within a few months of its launch. It is, in fact, considered one of the most successful ETF launches ever. It follows a modified equal weighting methodology and holds companies which provide cybersecurity solutions. It has an expense ratio of 60 basis points and currently has about 1.4 billion in assets. Now, looking at the top holdings, Cloudflare, Cisco Systems, and Splunk are HAK's top holdings. Then another one by First Trust, ticker symbol CIBR, the name is the First Risk NASDAQ Cybersecurity ETF. This launched a few months after HAK in 2015, and it is now, in fact, the largest cybersecurity ETF. It has 1.8 billion in assets, and it follows a modified liquidity weighting methodology. And this also charges 60 basis points, same expense ratio, and its top holdings are CrowdStrike, Palo Alto Networks, and also Splunk again. Then the cheapest ETF in this space is by iShares. It is called the iShares Cybersecurity and Tech ETF, IHAK, IHAK. It charges 47 basis points, and it launched last year, so it's relatively small, has about 72 million in assets so far. Then there's one by GlobalX. The ticker symbol is BUG, B-U-G, very interesting ticker symbol. It is the latest entrant in the space and also the smallest. It has about 23 million in assets as of now. It charges 50 basis points in expense ratio. Now, looking at the top holdings for IHAK and BUG, IHAK's top holdings are DocuSign, a very popular company in the current work-from-home environment, Okta, and you will recall that Dr. Chatterjee mentioned Okta and Splunk too, and Fortinet, ticker symbol FTNT. These are the top three holdings in this ETF. And for GlobalX ETF, ticker symbol BUG, the top holdings are Zscaler, another very hot stock, Fortinet, and Okta again. So these ETFs, they provide a diversified exposure to this fast-growing industry. And since many companies in this space are rather small and new, it makes more sense to invest in this space using one of these ETFs. Thanks for listening. If you want to learn more about these ETFs, please visit the ETF section of Zacks.com. Make sure to be on the lookout for the next edition of ETF Spotlight, and also make sure to subscribe. If you have any comments or questions, please email podcast@Zacks.com.
This material is being provided for informational purposes only, and nothing herein constitutes investment, legal, accounting, or tax advice, or a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold a security. Do not act or rely upon the information and advice given in this podcast without seeking the services of competent and professional legal, tax, or accounting counsel. Publication and distribution of this podcast is not intended to create, and the information contained herein does not constitute an attorney-client relationship. No recommendation or advice is being given as to whether any investment or strategy is suitable for a particular investor. It should not be assumed that any investments in securities, companies, sectors, or markets identified and described were or will be profitable. All information is current as of the date herein and is subject to change without notice. Any views or opinions expressed may not reflect those of Zacks Investment Research as a whole.